At its core, Age of Calamity is a Japanese Musou-style game. Think the once popular Dynasty Warriors series. But it's wrapped up in the awe-inspiring world and art style of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Well, I've spent over 50 hours playing Age of Calamity, or AOC as I like to call it. No, not that AOC. And I've seen everything this game has to offer. I've collected every collectible, I've unlocked the secret ending and maxed out almost every character. And I can confidently say that if you fell in love with the world and characters of Breath of the Wild, then you will thoroughly enjoy diving into Age of Calamity. That's not to say that this game doesn't have its issues. Its story tries real hard, but just doesn't hit home. Side missions are repetitive and sometimes subpar. But problems aside, there's a lot to love here for any Zelda fanboy.
That is Zelda and Link! Oh my god!
In the end, does this game live up to being the worthy prequel it should be? Well, let's find out as we glide into this Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity review. Two quick notes before we get started. First, this review is spoiler free, meaning I will only be showing characters from the marketing and quick clips of cutscenes that won't spoil any of the story in any way. And also, our scale for rating games here is pass, buy, or rent from Gamefly. In our last bit of housekeeping, I'd just like to ask a quick favor that if you found this review helpful, fun, entertaining, any of the above, please consider hitting that like or subscribe button. We're brand new here, so any love goes a long way in making us feel loved. Alright, enough of that, let's dive in to the review.
Excellent. I finally finished my painstaking analysis.
Oh yeah!
A little bit later, we'll dive into the story and its flaws, but just for context, let me give you a quick, broad stroke. Age of Calamity takes place 100 years before the events of Breath of the Wild, and chronicles the events and struggles of the champions as they try and repel and keep the evil forces of Ganon at bay, while trying to get ready for the inevitable return of Calamity Ganon. This is a Breath of the Wild world when Hyrule was thriving. And if AOC excels at anything, it's an insane level of detail. The amount of love the team at Omega Force has for its source material is seen in every nook and cranny of this game and design. From the costumes to cutscenes to the environments to the world map. And it is gorgeous. And this world and prequel setting of the 100 years before Breath of the Wild takes place is a perfect excuse for a Dynasty Warriors style game. The gameplay is fast, fun, and creative. What AOC does so cleverly is that it works in the core mechanics of Breath of the Wild directly into the combat. As Link, you'll shield surf through dozens of moblins, or freeze Lynels with the Sheikah Slate. You'll toss bombs into groups of unexpected enemies and feel a little too much joy as you see them tossed around in the air like a rowdy rodeo clown. You'll go hunting for Koroks, glide over battlefields, and pull treasure chests out of the ground with magnesis. These are all brilliant ideas and really drive home the setting. It feels as if you're returning to the same beautiful world of Breath of the Wild. It's seamless. Honestly, there were times where I was so sucked into the gameplay that I forgot this is not how all Zeldas play. When playing through Age of Calamity, you'll spend a lot of time on the world map. This acts as a major hub of the game. From here, you'll select missions, unlock characters and combos, fuse weapons, cook new recipes, and more. You unlock all this and more by collecting ingredients, monster trophies, and other goodies by doing missions. Overall, the world map works as a mission hub. However, I do wish they had built in some system to automatically show you which spots on the map you could unlock. One of the most annoying things in Age of Calamity is that after each level I would consistently have to scroll to each objective on the map to see if I had met the featured requirements to unlock it. And while these upgrades are meaningful, it quickly got old scrolling over each spot after each mission to see if I could unlock it. One of the biggest departures from the quote-unquote traditional Zelda game is the combat. Age of Calamity is a Musou game. Like I said, think along the lines of Dynasty Warriors, where you're single-handedly taking down dozens of enemies with a few slashes of your swords. Movesets in AOC are built around combos between light and heavy attacks, and as you clear more areas on the map, you unlock bigger and more powerful combos. Each combo is essentially a slight variation of the same two buttons, but they pull off very different moves. For example, 2 light hits and 1 heavy hit does one combo, while 3 light hits and 1 heavy hit does something completely different. These combos are cool, and because each one looks and feels so different to pull off, it goes a long way to making the combat stay fresh, even though you're essentially at its core just hitting the same 2 buttons. And as you blissfully bash baddies, you'll have a special meter that fills up that lets you pull off a powerful combo, pulling off a large area of attack move on the battlefield. So overall, the combat shines. Every slash, swipe, shot, and special feels earned and powerful. Combat feels good and responsive, even if for the most part, grunts are just put in your path to mow down in between fighting bosses. Speaking of bosses, ginger segue, bigger bosses have a weak point gauge. Whittle this down and it opens them up for a massive attack. These bosses take a lot more damage and deal some serious damage in return. So whittling down this gauge is definitely the easiest way to go.
Oh yeah!
Here, when fighting these bosses, Age of Calamity turns into a more traditional Zelda game where you're locked onto an enemy and you're hopping left and right looking for the perfect time to attack. Another lovely layer to the chaotic combat is the paper, rock, scissors counter type system thingy. This involves using the Sheikah Slate, which yes, makes a return in Age of Calamity. At certain points, when fighting big bosses, they will start to pull off a serious special move, but each one of those special moves can be countered by using the right counter move on the Sheikah Slate. Confusing? Well, just watch. See, it's easier than it sounds since the right icons pop above the boss's head showing you which move you need to use to correctly counter. This system never gets old, and as you start to learn more advanced combat tricks, these brutal boss battles become easier as you master juggling your enemy with stasis, specials, counters, and the perfect timing. Also, speaking of advanced combat tips, insert shameless plug here. If you haven't seen that video, watch it after this one. It has some good stuff in it. Another layer of combat that can have a drastically dramatic impact on combat is magic. Magic comes in the form of 3 spells: fire, ice, and electricity. These spells act as expected. Fire beats ice and vice versa. But here, more Breath of the Wild elements also come back into play. Start to cast any spell and you can tell by how big the radius is on the ground how it will affect the landscape. For example, if you start to cast electricity in a puddle, the radius of the spell gets bigger because electricity travels through water, showing you that you electrify everyone standing in that area, making the spell more potent. And astonishingly, there are also 18 different playable characters to choose from. And what's even more mind-boggling is that each character feels unique and different depending on who you choose. I had different strategies whether I was playing Link, Daruk, or Impa, who is, by the way, the most powerful person in the game. It's not Link, it's Impa. But making 18 different characters feel and play different is a massive accomplishment in itself. Well done, Omega Force. Well done. So, when it comes to the combat, just like Breath of the Wild, there is nothing complex on the surface. But mixing and matching these elements and unlocking new combos, counters, and spells offers a lot of fun and keeps the combat fresh and exciting throughout the length of the campaign. More importantly, there's an element of experimentation and learning how these systems work together that keeps you wanting to play and makes you feel powerful. I never grew tired of trying out new moves and juggling my existing moveset on Guardians or Massive Hinoxes or wiling out on Wizard Road. I had fun from start to finish. And all this action is set to some banger renditions of classic Zelda tunes, but with a more upbeat pace and style that fit this game. The music in Age of Calamity rocks. Just listen to this banger at the Battle of the Great Plateau. What a tune! Or how about this one when you're fighting your way through Hyrule Castle? The music rocks, and it definitely touched on my Zelda nostalgia and really immersed me in these mad missions. Some music, like the music from Korok Forest, felt ripped straight out of Final Fantasy VII Remake, which in no way is a bad thing. The music is a definite high point for me in this game. Even if you decide that Age of Calamity isn't for you and you're a Zelda fan, do yourself a favor and listen to the soundtrack. And while music is a definite high point, performance is a definite low point. This is a huge weak spot in Age of Calamity. Performance isn't always terrible, but when it is definitely bad. The game often dips below 30 frames a second, and it's noticeable, especially when there are dozens of guys on the screen at once. Performance is downright abysmal when characters like Urbosa are surrounded by a bunch of enemies and she pulls off her special lightning attack. The game almost grinds to a halt. Loading is another issue, especially coming off of next-gen consoles where loading times are non-existent. Age of Calamity has some serious loading times. Overall performance and loading are not great. It wouldn't stop me from playing this game, but it is something you should definitely be aware of going into it. So I'm torn when it comes to this part of the review. For the most part, the main missions are awesome. The missions feel expansive and massive. They capture that feeling that you're actually in a war against Ganon. And they have some variant and exciting objectives to them. A little bit more disappointing are the Divine Beast missions. These missions do give you the feeling that you're piloting a larger-than-life beast, but they don't really amount to what they could be. There's nothing here more than really just point and shoot. And after a couple of times, they're just not exciting. Sadly, this can also be said of the side missions. And while the side missions are fun and the combat is engaging enough to carry them, I really wish there were more objectives to them. Most of the side content boils down to run to Objective A, which is overrun with baddies, clear out the baddies and beat the boss before moving on to Spot B, where you'll do the same thing. Or kill X number of people in so many minutes. There's not really a lot of meat here, and I think it's an easy fix because some of the main missions have better objectives. Why not port those over into the side missions as well? It would add a lot of weight to this game and make this game way better. And finally, that brings us to story. The overarching story of Age of Calamity is pretty simple and somewhat lackluster in areas. However, the cutscenes that accompany this story are spectacular, and there are a lot of cutscenes, way more than the average Zelda game. To be honest, I hope this is a trend we continue to see in the future. I simply could not get enough of them. And for the most part, the voice acting is good to decent.
Thought it would be best.
Except for that god-awful voice during the loading screens.
A Zora princess with the power to heal others' wounds was selected to pilot Divine Beast Valuta.
Why? Just why? In terms of characters or character development, don't expect too much. The champions are very much the champions you see in Breath of the Wild. Druk has his light-hearted sense of humor.
My favorite. Prime rock roast.
Mempha, her quiet sense of resolve.
I hope to become stronger.
Urbosa, her need to protect Zelda.
Little bird.
And Revali, his over-the-top ego that makes him, well, Rivali.
Ridiculous. Every last one of you.
The real stars of the show are Zelda and Link, who happen to be the only characters that show any real growth. The story is a quote-unquote prequel, although certain events, spoiler-free here, that literally start happening in the opening cutscene put the idea of prequel into question. And this is where the story somewhat falls apart for me. I understand why they go the way they do, but I would much rather have them stick to a straight prequel than to tug at the thread they're tugging at. So like I said, the story is not that engaging, but the cutscenes will pull you through. There are some really good, epic, and action-oriented cutscenes. Okay, so story aside, that brings us to our verdict. Should you pass, buy, or rent from GameFly? This is a tricky one, because if you love Breath of the Wild or Zelda as a whole, that will affect your decision. Personally, if you fell in love with the world and characters of Breath of the Wild, then you'll want to buy this game. There's 20 to 40 hours of Zelda goodness to be had. If you're a moderate Zelda fan or a Muso fan, then you might want to dip a toe in and wiggle it around, in which case I would say rent this game from GameFly, or get it used, or wait for it to go on sale. And if none of what I just said sounds appealing, then just pass on this game. We'll have plenty of Zelda, hopefully, coming up in the next year since it's the 35th anniversary, so there'll be something else to scratch that itch. And that's it. That's our review. Remember to like and subscribe if you like this video. And if you decide to get this game, make sure to come back and watch our advanced tips video, which will make your life a lot easier. This is the Ginger Gamer Guy, and thank you for watching. And until next time, stay red.